Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our latest Larson-Juhl webinar on pricing and upselling. I can't really believe it's been 5 months since our first webinar, and a lot has changed in that short space of time. I've decided for a start that I needed to compete with Jon for the best virtual background. So those of you who joined last time will notice that change. And also, many of you will know that we have a new customer service centre located just over the road from our old head office. It's a state-of-the-art building that will help us to provide you with the level of customer service that you would expect from us at Larson-Juhl once we're fully moved in. Now, I do apologise for the disruptions many of you would have experienced over the last month as we've been moving from 3 buildings into 1, and I appreciate your patience as we finalise moving operations fully to our new customer service centre. Now, today's webinar is in response to our survey where you told us that pricing is a subject that you would like support and advice on. I have help today from Mark Wilson, who owns the framing pricing software company Framiac. Now, many of you will know Mark. He's been a framer in Australia, so he really understands the challenges and complexities of pricing in our industry and has real life experience to help him develop his software and his experience from his company. Now, Mark's also joined today by Jon Price from Handmade Framing and Gallery. Jon will add some practical and technical support to the webinar. So once Mark has gone through some of the science of pricing, then Jon will help us to relate that into everyday business and give you some scenarios that should help you.
Great. Hi, Matt. It's Jon here. You can't see me for some reason because I can't start my video. Mark may be in the same situation. I'm trying to start my video. I think you just don't want to see me today. That's what.
Listen, I think I might have figured out why that will be. So I will make you host in a minute, and then I think you'll be able to share your video as well. I've managed to get Mark on. So what I'll suggest we do is I will hand over to Mark to start the session, and then whilst I'm doing that, I'll work out the video bit so that everybody, when we get to your section, Jon can see you as well.
That's all right. It's not imperative you see me during that bit, actually, so you could leave it till the end, Matt.
Okay, no problem. We'll leave that to the end. So, okay, no problem. Thanks, Jon. But Jon will be with you a bit later during the webinar. So I'd like to welcome Mark. Welcome, Mark, to the webinar.
So I'm going to stop my video and share my screen, and we'll go through the pricing seminar. So hopefully everybody can see that screen now. So I think we're going to start with first talking about profit and why it's so important. Framers generally spend time building relationships with their customers, and some feel awkward about charging a reasonable price for their framing. But without being profitable, it's difficult to be the best you can for your customers. And by lowering your prices, you're appealing to the lowest common denominator and perhaps missing out on the customers you want and also need.
It's funny you say that, Mark, and it's Jon here, by the way, even though you can't see me, I promise I am here. When I took over my business, Handmade Picture Framing, I was aware that we were charging very little for what we were doing and therefore making very little profit on some jobs. What that meant is that I started to feel very pressured to rush those jobs. And I know now, looking back, that I accepted flaws and issues with the framing that there's no way I'd ever accept them now. In other words, I guess you could say I wasn't providing my customers with the best that I could offer them. And what happened is, after a while, I started to resent those jobs. And I realized that by charging too little, I was A, not making much profit, B, those frames weren't helping my business and my business reputation, and C, I was starting not to enjoy what I did for a living.
Yeah, and I know that because I lived that in my early years as well. You know, what you're saying rings true with me. Yep. And, you know, I know that working on your pricing can seem arduous, especially when there's more pressing things to do, like making frames. However, there's no point making frames if you're not making enough profit, or worse, not even covering the cost of making the frames. So understanding your pricing will allow you to feel better about the price you charge and allow you to have a more profitable and a more fulfilling business, just as John and I discussed then. And I want to stress the point of being consistent and transparent with your pricing, and the importance of never making preconceptions about your customers. Varying prices on what you think a customer will pay is just prone to error. And I can personally relate to two instances where if I'd made assumptions about the customer, I would have missed out on a good deal of business. So both these customers were men. Both of them were dressed down as if they were just off for a surf, as if they were just one of the many old surfers that lived in our area. And I'm thinking of John as I say that.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say there, Mark, but we'll speak about this later on.
So one of these old surfers turned out to be a property developer for which we ended up doing a lot of work for his pub and hotel developments. And I've put some up on the slide there. And the other was a photographer working for SAE Institute. Now, I don't know whether anybody's ever heard of them, but they're a private media college that has campuses all around the world, including 5 here in the UK. Now, we ended up doing thousands of frames that were sent to their campuses worldwide. Now, if I'd priced too cheaply based on a bad assumption of these men, I would have lost a lot of profit. If I'd neglected them entirely, I would have lost a lot of business.
It's funny, Mark, that you talk about that right at the start of this presentation. When I was chatting to Matt at Larson-Juhl about doing this presentation, he said to me, John, can you start off by giving your 3 top tips about pricing, based on your real life experience of having built up a successful framing business? And my first tip really follows on from what you've just been saying. I think that it's human nature to make judgments and assumptions about people. We do it all the time, based on their appearance, based on their speech, based on their behavior. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to what you've just been saying by pointing out that no matter what somebody's background or their level of affluence, people place different values on different things. So what one person's willing to pay for something is entirely different to what someone else is willing to pay for that same thing. If I ask our listeners now, or our viewers, to look at the images of the 2 people on the screen, you've got a smartly dressed businesswoman and a less well-dressed, or shall we say scruffy man. What each one of those is willing to pay to have a given item framed is something that we just can't tell, because naturally, if I said to you, what would each one of those people have, pay to have something framed, you'd say, well, it depends on what that item is. And of course it does, it depends on what that item is and how much it means to them. So in other words, we don't know. I have customers that are clearly very well off. I spend a lot of time talking to my customers, probably too much time. They are, customers that, for example, are ex-city bankers. They own listed country properties. They've got a lot of money, but actually some of them are willing to spend very little on their framing. On the other hand, I've also got customers that are much more affluent, but to whom their framing on certain pieces is very important. So the point is that when a new customer walks through the door, how do you know what they're prepared to pay? And the answer is you don't, and there's no way that you can know. I think it's worth saying as well that we can also make assumptions about the worth of an item based on our own values. It was literally a week ago, I think, a chap brought in a large photograph to be framed that he'd taken himself and it had blown up. He'd previously framed this photograph himself, and I'm sure you can all imagine the scenario. The backboard was about a centimetre thick chipboard, and apart from that, the frame consisted of the photograph and the perspex on the front, which was also cracked and yellowing. It was held together by screws which went through the perspex, through the photograph, and into the chipboard backboard. Now, the first thing I'm thinking is, this chap's not going to want to spend a lot of money on getting this picture reframed. He's had it hung like that for ages. I talked him through the different levels that the Fine Art Trade Guild offer, the 5 different levels of framing. And he said, well, I can replace the photograph very easily. I've taken it myself. Budget level's fine. And again, I'm thinking, geez, this guy's not going to want to spend much. We go through the design options, we price up the whole thing, and I look at him and say, it works out at £203. And I'm trying not to cringe as I tell him this. Oh, that's fine, he says. You do take card, don't you? And I guess my point is, my number one tip then is that you never know how much a customer is willing to spend on framing a given item.
That's so true.
My next tip is something that it's taken me a long time to learn. You know, I've done a lot of different things in my life, and a lot of those roles were sales roles. You know, I've sold suits to gentlemen, I've sold electrical goods, I've sold specialist hi-fi, advertising, and even I had a stint many years ago selling timeshare. And I've learned this the hard way. You know, a lot of people think that being good at sales is about having the gift of the gab, and it's not. To sell something, you have to match your product to your customer's needs. Yeah, you need to be presentable, you need to be personable, you need to talk to people and get them listening. Talk to people about what they want framing, and you need, most of all, to listen to them. You do this by asking relevant questions and listening to their answers. And what they're doing when they're answering you, when they're telling you about their thing that they want framing, is they're telling you about their wants and about your needs. And you need to learn to ignore certain phrases like, oh, I don't want to spend much, because, you know, how much is much? It's you know, it varies from one person to another. But the point is, if you listen and if you match your customer's needs, you're far more likely to make a successful sale.
Yes, and I don't want to spend much means I have no idea what this will cost me. It doesn't mean I don't want to spend much.
Now, moving on then to my third tip. My third tip is create a USP. Unique service proposition, unique selling point. It doesn't really matter what USP means precisely. The point is what you do. And I think, you know, many framers think to themselves, well, I just need to appeal to anybody who wants something framed, don't I? And I can understand that. And the answer is, to a certain extent, yes, but from a marketing point of view, it just doesn't work that way. From a marketing point of view, you need to match people's needs very specifically. So the questions to ask then are, what different services and products do people want from a framer? Which of those match your skill set as a framer? Think as well about who you want to appeal to, what kind of customers you want. And then start to think a little bit about your competitors, your direct competitors. What do they do? What's their skill set, and who do they appeal to? And what this information does is it gives you an idea of what you can offer that people want and that your competitors don't offer. And this means that you can match your USP to gaps in the market and then move on to think, okay, so who are these people that want my USP, and how do I market to them? So on one hand, you can be very specialist in what you do. And if you're very specialist, well, people should, in theory, travel further for what you do, and they should be willing to pay more for it. But then on the other hand, if you start to look at your competitors and say, well, my competitors are all high level in their framing, it may be that the gap in the market is more towards the middle of the market. So what you do is you make frames that aren't quite as high specification, you charge a little bit less, and you produce more. So you're looking for your niche and you're trying to match your USP to it. To elaborate on that a little bit, when I bought my framing business, as I say, it was about just under 7 years ago now, I looked at the other framers in the area and I realized that we were all aiming for the low to the mid end of the market. We weren't charging much. We weren't offering much more than budget framing. And just to give you an idea, you know, my income in the first year of business, and this is running a business that had been established for 15 years, and I know my income was the same as the previous owners. My income in the first year was £13,000. Now I needed to charge more, and I needed to find a way to justify charging more. And I looked at that market and I said, well, the obvious gap in the market is at the higher end. So I set about improving my skill set, getting qualifications like the Guild Certified Framer qualification to match that skill set. And I set about marketing to customers who wanted more from their framing and were willing to pay more for it. I regularly have customers now that tell me how much more I'm charging than my competitors. And then they go on to tell me why it's worth paying me more for what I do. So I've created my USP and I've marketed my business based upon that USP.
We also had customers tell us we were more expensive, but they also told us the service and knowledge was far superior and that they felt confident that the correct choice had been made when they walked out the door. You know, that sense of confidence that you can give your customers through knowledge is wonderful. So we'll talk about the science of pricing a little bit, and I want to talk about pricing and not keeping it static. It's not a static thing. It's not a set once and forget. There are constant changes to prices. You know, there's supplier price increases and there's increases in your overheads that should be monitored. You should also be testing your market to see if you can push up your margins. It should be easy to change your prices as and when you need to. Now, a complex pricing model makes it difficult to be agile and be able to respond to these changes. This means that your profit can be eaten away because your prices remain static while your costs are going up.
Okay, Mark, if I can just interrupt for a second, you talked just then about testing your market. I think you said testing your market to see if you can push up prices. One of the things that I do is I note down rejection rates, but I also note down sales where I think, or I know because they've told me that the customer would have paid more, and sales where I had to moderate the design to suit a lesser budget. What I feel this does is it gives me an overall view of how customers are responding to my prices, because I think it's in our nature, and I think everybody will agree with me, I think it's in our nature to focus on and to remember the rejections rather than the acceptances. And I find that, you know, if I note down all the responses, the positives and the negatives, then it gives me I suppose, a better picture, or the bigger picture, and it enables me to see how my prices are being accepted.
Yes, we need to work with the overall picture, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well as we go through. So having a good understanding of your pricing allows you to be confident that you're charging the correct price for your service. Poor pricing knowledge can make for inconsistent and unprofitable pricing. So in the next few slides, we're going to discuss cost, the cost associated with pricing. And when we've considered these, we can then talk about markups.
You know, taking over a business, Mark, where the prices were essentially made up, I can tell you that, you know, inconsistent pricing causes real problems. What I mean by that is when we took over the business, my wife and I, we spent a month with the previous owners, and they were running the business then, and we were just kind of shadowing and learning some basic framing skills from them and just seeing how they were running the business in general. And they used to just make up prices on the spot, and it really, really caused issues. I mean, for example, you know, you'd have a customer that would come in, they'd bring a piece of work in to be framed, and a price would be made up on the spot, wasn't noted down, and then when the customer came to collect the piece of work, it was more expensive than the original cost. You know, that created real issues, as you can imagine. Had another guy that brought in regularly film posters to be framed, and they were all the same size. He wanted them framed all in the same way, and every time he came in, the price was different. You know, so you ended up in a situation that was, like I say, it was embarrassing. It was unprofessional, and I guess that, you know, a consistent pricing system is going to avoid those embarrassing and those unprofessional problems.
Yes, and I think a good thing is to put yourself in the customer's shoes, and you walk into the business and think about how you would respond to that. I know I wouldn't respond very well to that type of thing. So what we're going to do first is talk about labour, and that's because labour is a cost, and we need to know what something costs before we can mark it up. We first need to know what our cost of labour is. Now, this is done by calculating an hourly rate. We take all our overheads, that's rent, loans, electricity, marketing, insurance, all of those things that make up our overheads, and we divide them by the time worked to get an hourly rate. Now, we need to be careful when working out our annual framing hours. This is not the time you actually spend making frames. It is the time you spend making frames, sorry, not the time the shop is open. and it's a vastly different number. And I could elaborate more on this, but it requires a bit more. And I think in this slot, we don't have enough time, but I'm going to direct you to where you can get more information on this. So an hourly rate is fixed to your business. The only way to change your hourly rate is to lower your overheads or increase the output of work within your normal working hours, not including overtime, just the time in which you want to keep your business open. So one business's hourly rate does not necessarily match another's. Now, the hourly rate we are talking about here is the cost of business. A markup will be applied to this rate to allow us a profit. And an hourly rate is the same as what an electrician, an accountant, an auto repairer, all of those type of people charge for their service. It's for their time worked.
A lot of framers that I've spoken to, Mark, feel very uncomfortable about charging over a certain hourly rate for what they do. But I think, we need to think about what the garage charges, or even what the window cleaner charges. My wife and I bought a Vauxhall a few years ago, and it has a 100,000 mile warranty on it. So every year it needs to go in to the main dealer and be checked for this guarantee. The main Vauxhall dealer, charges £120 an hour. Now, my window cleaner comes and cleans my windows every Monday. He's just done them, actually. They're looking very, very sparkling and clean. He comes and cleans my windows every Monday. Takes him about 10 minutes, and he charges me £8. If you work that out, that's an hourly rate of £48. And I know I'm probably not, maybe I'm going off tangent a little bit here, because of course I guess the point that you're making, Mark, is if you work out your hourly rate, the hourly rate that you need to charge based on your business costs divided by your production time, i.e. the time you're making frames, it's simple. If you don't charge more than that, you don't make any profit on your labor.
Yes, I want to emphasize that point. It's not a made up number. It's a number that's fixed to your business, your overheads divided by your output.
I guess if you're making up numbers, Mark, you probably wouldn't be here presenting this.
Probably not. We now have an hourly rate. So we've calculated our hourly rate, and we need to know how to build that into the cost of the frame. So this is done by charging the hourly rate against the time to make the frame. If the frame takes 1 hour to make, in this instance, it would cost £42. A frame that takes half an hour would cost £21. That's a fairly simple kind of calculation to make. So we'll just move on. And we'll talk about materials, because they're also a cost. The others are a fixed cost. They're fixed to your business. Materials costs change as you make more frames. You make more frames, you buy more materials, and so on. So materials are generally the smaller cost of making the frame. Remember that it's often labor that eats into your profit. But with materials, there should be a wastage amount factored in. I like to do it as a percentage and high enough to cover most situations. I believe the minimum for wastage should be around 40%, but even 50% is not unreasonable.
That's actually quite reassuring to me, Mark, because if you're factoring a 40 or 50% wastage cost, then first of all, you don't worry about that bit of frame that's left over, that bit of moulding that's left over, and you don't think, oh, I better save this, for my next job. And also, I think the other thing is, if you make a mistake on a frame, you can recut again, because practically half the moulding cost or the material cost has been allowed for, or an additional half has been allowed for anyway. I think that's a very reassuring thing to think about and to incorporate within your pricing.
Yeah, I mean, there will be times when wastage is higher than 40%, and there are times when it's lower, but it's a bit of a swings and roundabout kind of situation. And you also need to think about what it is costing to store stock, particularly moulding, which is, really bulky to store. To be profitable, you need to be efficient, because time is money and you're spending time making frames. So consider the lost productivity by stock taking up valuable workspace. At an hourly rate of £42 an hour, if you spend 5 minutes searching for a quarter sheet piece of mount board, which costs about £1.15, the label will cost you £3.50. So that's a loss of £2.35 just for searching for 5 minutes. And they say that 80% of the frames you sell generally come from 20% of your samples. So you need to keep a range of low, mid and high range samples to try and meet most customers' expectations. But you also need to monitor what's selling. Now, Chop allows you to sell moldings that you do not, want sitting around taking up space. And if we look at the top price breakdown, we can see that the per meter price is quite a bit lower than the Chop. However, you can see the Chop one, which is below. However, you can see that with wastage considered, the per meter molding is almost the same cost as Chop. And there is also no cost for cutting the molding. We can also consider that with Chop molding, we know exactly what we're going to pay. Whereas with the per meter, we're not sure. Are we going to get 5 meters or 6 meters of molding? If it's 6 meters, will there be 2.9 meters remaining? Will it have damage? Will we be able to sell the remainder? Will it sit around taking up costly storage space and adding to clutter? If it is, if it's not a popular molding, most likely it's going to end up as waste at some time in the future.
So just to clarify, Mark, what you're saying then is that apart from a framer's core moldings, the ones that they're selling time and time again, Chop actually saves you money because there's no wastage and there's no storage. I've got to say, I'm right now, I'm guilty of this. I can think of numerous times when I've had premium moldings left over from a job, and then they sit around for years, they get in the way, I'm moving them to get to other things, they're costing me time to move. And then when I finally get around to another job that uses that molding because it's not a popular molding, albeit a premium molding, it's either damaged or there isn't enough to complete the job anyway. And so then I order another length, and guess what? The other length has got wastage, or it's damaged, or when it arrives, it's from a different batch and it doesn't meet it doesn't match the color of the first molding anyway.
Yep, I think we can all nod our heads and say we're guilty of that. I know if I think back on the expensive high street rent that I was paying for storing moldings, I kind of shudder. If I had my time again, I certainly would be going Chop for a lot more molding.
Yeah, I think one of the things that having had this, done this webinar with you and having had this conversation before, it's really made me think about the way that I'm going to use the Chop service in the future. Because like I say, I've just got molding sitting here that really, it'd actually be more efficient if I were to just put it on the wood burner.
Yeah.
We'll move on. Sorry, Mark.
That's okay. So now we've considered all our costs. We've got our labour cost and our material cost. It's time to move on to markups. But before we go too far, I want to talk about the difference between gross and net markup. It's important to understand that gross markup is where you multiply your materials by a factor of 4 or 5. Now, this hides the cost of labour and therefore gives a false impression that a healthy profit is being made. Now, when I look back to my early days before I understood this, I think about the amount of profit I gave away because I felt I was charging too much, only to discover that all my overheads were eating into any profit I thought I was making. And for a number of years, I just didn't get this. I thought the gross profit was all mine, and I used to get embarrassed about making so much profit, to the point that I was frequently discounting, only to find out that at the end of each month, I was struggling to cover my bills. As I said, it took me about 3 years to understand this. And this is when I actually invested time understanding my pricing. And it's a time when I started to get my head above water. Now, net markup includes the cost of making the frame and disappointingly shows how little profit is being made. It's very sobering when you see that. Extremely sobering. So I think markups are a complex thing, and it's driven by your business and how well you sell yourself or listen to your customers, as John explained. So you shouldn't worry too much about what your competitors charging. I mean, how do you know, after all, whether they're making money? So you need to think about what makes you stand out and whether your customers believe this is a reason to shop with you.
I think, Mark, that to me, unique is the key word. We've talked about USP earlier on in the 3 tips that I gave. But in my opinion, you've got to make your product and your service unique. With regard to pricing, you have to find out what enough people are willing to pay for that unique product and service. And the question is really, how do you find out? As I indicated earlier, what I do is I use my conversion and my rejection rate. I note it down, and I use that as a way of monitoring whether my prices are correct. I think we're going to go on to talk about that more in a few minutes, so I won't say any more for now.
Yeah, we'll talk about how you can work out your markups, because it's a complex thing. And one of the best ways, it's really hard to get right. And one of the best ways you can kind of think about it is to do a bit of reverse engineering. Work out your average cost per frame and the number of frames produced each year, and this will give you an annual cost. You can then work out what average net markup you would need to apply to give the income you expect. And you'll most likely vary the markup based on both the cost and size of the frame, but an average markup is a great place to start.
As a concept, this works really well for me, actually. When I took over Handmade, I've already given you an idea of what sort of amount I was earning in that first year. I said to myself, look, if I don't earn X amount within the next 5 years, that's it. I'm selling the business. I'm giving up framing. So what I did is I thought, okay, well, how much do I need to earn a year? What do I want to earn per year, realistically? And I divided that into my working weeks, and then I divided that into working days. I set myself a target of turning over a certain value of framing and making a certain amount of profit per day, or that was it. If I wasn't doing that, I was giving up the business. Framers are skilled people. Many framers that I know work really long hours. And I just want to say, we shouldn't be working our socks off for a pittance. And if you are, then you're just being a busy fool.
Yes. And I think let's move on and talk a bit more about that. I said earlier how our hourly rate of £42 was the cost price. Now we want to mark up that labour, but we also want to mark up the materials as well. Now, instead of applying many different markups to all the different components of the frame, I like to apply my markups to the combined cost of the frame. It's more agile and it makes it easier to change prices as and when I need to. Put all your components and labour costs together and then apply one markup. Now, this is how all manufacturers work. Car, bicycle or furniture manufacturers, they work exactly the same. For example, a car manufacturer doesn't apply one markup to the wheel, another one to the engine, another one to the fan belt, and so on.
Yeah, it makes sense, Mark, because essentially, we're selling the whole product, aren't we? We're not selling the individual components, not normally anyway.
That's right. We sell frames, not components of the frame. So therefore, we should think of it as one whole product when applying a markup. We can also consider varying our markup as the cost increases. We've probably all experienced that with selling AR glass, where you apply a lower markup to the higher cost, but make more profit. The same rule can be applied to all the other components, for example, a high-end moulding. It's easy to sell something that looks unique and of higher quality to a customer. Customers will respond better to nicer designs, and it's harder to go back to the lesser option. And, premium glass has shown that we can sell a higher value product at a lower margin and make more profit. You can apply this same rule to all the components and the labour that make up the frame.
I think, Mark, it took me a while, if I'm honest, to get my head around this. But as I understand it, what you're basically saying is that a framer can sell a higher quality frame design. So the whole design, premium moulding, anti-reflective glass, treble mount, for example, and a design that takes more time and therefore uses more labor. And they can sell that premium design at a lower percentage of markup and still make more profit than they would on a lower quality frame design at a higher markup.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where the cost is derived, whether it's the glass, the frame, or the labor. If the price comes out the same, if it's the same cost price, you just apply the same markup. And a variable markup depending on whether it's low cost or high cost. And if it's a high cost, by giving it a lower markup, you give the customer something that will wow them and something that they want to show off to their family and friends. And that's great because that brings more customers in.
Okay, well look, let's move on. Let's look at an example of that theory in practice. So what we've done, everybody, is we've taken one piece of artwork, okay, which is this bird you can see up here on your screen. We've taken one piece of artwork and we framed it in 3 different ways with a budget design, a mid-range design, and a premium design. And we're going to look at each one, see things like the labor cost, and we're going to apply a high markup to the budget, and then we're going to apply a much lower markup to the premium, and the mid-range will be in the middle. And we're going to see basically how much profit we make on each one. So this is our first design. To speak slightly about the design, what I've done is I've used a budget price moulding at £2.72 per metre from the Larson-Juhl confetti range. This is the sage green, 23 millimetre wide moulding. We've used a single mount. The single mount is a cream core, again the most budget mount within the Larson-Juhl range. Just to talk about design again for a second, it's 45 millimetre wide top and side borders and 52 millimetre bottom border. We're not using any undermount with our budget design. We've got backing board, of course, and we're using 2mm float glass. If we look at the pricing, it's taken us 27 minutes to produce this frame. The cost of producing the frame is £24.85, which includes £18.19 for labour. And that labour rate, by the way, is the £42 per hour that Mark talked about earlier on. Our selling price is £50.61, and our markup on this is 70%, but that gives us a profit of £17.32.
Yeah, so we can see here that how much the frame cost is labour, and how the profit is much less than you might expect from a £50 frame. We'll move on to our second option. Okay,
so this is our mid-range frame. Okay, so what we've done here is we've used a more expensive moulding at £5.69 per metre. It's a light lacquer teak veneer, 30 millimetres wide. We've actually priced it up with a double mount. You can't see that very well in the picture, but there is a double mount there. The top mount is 55 millimetre wide borders on the top and the side, 65 millimetre on the bottom. Our bottom mount is 2 millimetres wide. I've used conservation undermount here on this design as well, because it's that sort of mid-range commended level of framing. I like to use the 8950 from Larson-Juhl, by the way. Our backing board, we've used backing board, and this time we've used a more premium glass. We've used Larson-Juhl AR70, which is the anti-reflective glass. If we look at the price on that and the price breakdown, our labour time is longer, it's 39 minutes. The cost of producing the frame is £44.73, including £27.44 labour. Our selling price is higher at £80.32. With a 50% markup, so a lower markup, the profit is £22.20.
Yeah, and I should point out there, John, that the labour has gone up because A, we're doing a double mount, but also because we're using premium glass. I find these glasses harder to work with when you're cleaning them. So there's extra time for cleaning that glass as well.
Okay, I hadn't realised, Mark, that there was that you were incorporating more time for cleaning specialist glass, which is fantastic because it does take more time, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so generally, as products increase in price, more care needs to be taken. So time is automatically added as products need more care. And you can see that this option is more expensive, but the frame and the double mount has created greater impact. It's costing more, but it's more appealing to me. And you can also see the markup is 20% lower, but the profit returned is greater.
Okay, so our premium.
So I was just going to say, with this one's more of a premium product. It looks more appealing, and the larger frame means it's going to have more presence on the wall. It demands the viewer's attention.
It's excuse me. It's funny you should say that, Mark. I know you and I have talked about frame design before, and that's one of the things I like to do in a frame design. I like my frame design to demand a little bit of attention. And I think from what you've said, you feel the same way.
Especially if it's small, because if it's small, it could just get lost. Whereas if you make something that's a bit of a statement, it makes people go up and look at it and then look at the picture as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it doesn't want to overwhelm the artwork, but at the same time, it's great to me. If it demands attention, it makes people look at. I love that. I want the picture to be noticed, but I want the frame to be noticed as well.
Yeah.
Now this premium frame design that I have designed here, it's using the Florentina range, which is a range of moldings that I really love. It's very popular as far as I'm concerned. This is the yellow and green spoon. It's 45 millimeters wide. The list price is $8.34 per meter. Here I've used a treble mount. The top mount is 55 on the top and sides and 65 on the bottom. That's definitely millimeters, by the way. The mid mount is 3 millimeters and the bottom mount is 7 millimeters. Of course, I've used conservation undermount, backing board, and this time the glass is the ultimate glass, I guess you call it. It's AR99, anti-reflective, anti-UV. If we get back to price, it's taken longer to make this frame, 50 minutes. The cost of making the frame is more. It's $65.41, which includes our extended labor time of 30. So the price is on the labor is $34.72. Our selling price, including VAT, is $109.56. Our markup is only 40% this time, but our profit is £25.89.
Yeah, so we can see that the markup is of 40% is 30% lower than the budget frame, but a greater profit's being returned on this job.
So if we move on to the next slide where we can compare those three together, what we're demonstrating here is that a premium frame with a lower markup is more appealing to our customer, depending on whether you like my designs or not. It offers them better value, but as framers, it makes us more money. And as an additional point, I said at the start of this presentation that one of my top tips was listening to your customers and matching your product to their needs. To me, this is an example of how you can do that. You can offer alternative designs at the Fine Art Trade Guild's different levels of framing that match the individual and the customer's needs.
Yeah, I like your designs, John.
Thank you, Mark.
Congratulations between us there. I was always disappointed if we didn't show our customers the best options they could have. I really felt disappointed. I truly believe our business was built on giving our customers, really unique and quality designs. Now, we're going to talk about how we can check our markup. So we've got a selling price, but is it a price that the customer agrees with? And the best way of knowing this is by monitoring how well we convert our quotes into orders. We should expect some rejection, and rejection isn't always because our price is too high. It may be that the customer doesn't value the item very much. It may be that the level of service was not good enough, or it may be that the customer was undersold. Now, the best way of knowing how your customers view your pricing is by monitoring your conversion rate. If you have a high conversion rate, you should be able to raise your prices. If your conversion rate is low, it may be the price is high or that the service does not meet that price point. It's very easy to remember the customers that rejected the quote and forget about those that went ahead. This is why it's good to have a solid record of numbers to look back on. If you can see your conversion rate and make informed decisions about your markup, you're going to be in a better place.
Mark, just then you suggested that if your product was correctly priced, you should expect a conversion rate of 70 to 80%. How are you arriving at that figure?
Well, to put it simply, everyone agreeing with your price means you're too cheap. If you have a lot of repeat business and a great reputation, your conversion rate, it's probably going to be higher, to be honest. But we need to accept that we do not meet the needs of everyone who walks through the door. You know, you should have a conversion rate that you're comfortable with, but not to accept some rejection is just unrealistic. And the higher you set your prices, the more rejection you are likely to have. But you'll also be more profitable and able to afford the higher level of rejection. You know it's uncomfortable to see people walk out. I've been there. I know what it's like. But you need to learn where to draw the line if the customer says no. I'm not saying it's easy, but it gets easier when you see a more profitable business and you're not working as hard.
I think for me, Mark, you know, when I first met you, we had a conversation and you said to me, John, you know, you can put up your prices by 10%, even if that means losing 10% of your customers, and you'll still make more profit. And I suppose for anybody who's sitting there now thinking, what? And you know, and perhaps they've got the calculator out and they're doing the maths on that. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about net profit. You'll make more net profit in that scenario because you'll be making less frames and spending less on materials for the same amount of turnover. But Mark, if I can just ask you a question here. Rejection rates, conversion rates. If I price up a job for a customer after going through the design process and the customer then says no, what I normally do is I look at the price breakdown. I use Framer, as you know, and I look at the price breakdown on Framer and I try to offer them another design with perhaps one of the more pricey aspects of the frame changed. So it might be changing from anti-reflective glass to float glass, or a simpler mount design, or you know, a less pricey molding or whatever. Would you consider that a rejection?
No, not at all. I mean, you've listened to the customer and you've met their needs. So you've still won the quote and you've done your job correctly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've still got the sale, which is what I'm trying to do. I think it's also worth saying that rejection rate, in my mind, and tell me if you disagree, but to me, rejection rate is relative to a customer's preconceptions as well. So I'm talking about your story, a shop image, I'm talking about your marketing, I'm talking about your reputation. So if you've got, for example, a high price, high quality reputation, that's got to put some people off in advance, which means that those people that are walking through the door are probably expecting to pay a little bit more anyway. You know, even though my prices now are over double what they were when I took over the business, and I'm being conservative when I say that, they're more than over double, but even though my prices now are over double what they were when I took over the business, you know, I have customers who come in and comment, oh, I thought it would cost more. And I often find that the price rejections I do get are simply because, you know, that customer just wasn't within my target market. I didn't meet their needs. And you know, we have to accept that it's hard to cater for everybody. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want the customer who wants to pay £30 for a bespoke frame.
No, I'd have to agree with everything you said there. And I wouldn't want the £30 customer either, because it's going to cost me money to make that frame. You know, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, we're in business to be profitable, aren't we? You know, we love what we.
I mean, we like to be nice to our customers, but if we're too nice to our customers, we're not going to have a business. You know, you've got to find that ground. A quote, by the way, is a firm quote. The customer has walked into your business, you designed a frame, and you gave them the quote. It's not an appraisal. You know, it's not someone walking in and going, I've got a picture about this big by this big, how much will it cost a frame? That's an estimate. It's not a quote. So, you know, and my sales hat here, in our app, Framer Free Pro, you can save both quotes and orders. And from this, you're able to run a report like the one over on the left, on the slide, and monitor your conversion rate. So this allows you to make informed decisions about your pricing. And this isn't a real report, by the way. This is a few jobs I put through as an example. I would be busier than that if I was really framing. So I think we can wrap up now, and we'll go through a few golden rules. And I think, first of all, try not to worry about what your competitor charges. How do you know if they're making money, you know? And think about what makes you stand out and whether your customers believe this is a reason to shop with you. Spend some time understanding your pricing model. You know, the more confident you are about your cost and your markup, the better you'll feel about giving the price to the customer. Show the customer premium options. Let them decide whether they can afford it. You've got to value your customers and to think that they can afford the best. Be consistent and transparent with your prices. It builds confidence with your customers. And monitor your conversion rates from quotes to orders. And remember, be agile. Have a pricing model that lets you move your prices when and if you need to.
I think you've told us there, Mark, about the golden rules of what to do, but tell us what not to do.
Well, first one there is don't start negotiating on price. You know, when you give a customer a price, especially a customer that's first walked into your business for the first time, you give them the price, there's going to be pause. They're going to need to evaluate what you've just told them. They're looking at what the design you've created, the level of service and advice they've received, and they're putting that against the price that you've given them. And they just need to run that process through there. There's going to be a few moments of quiet while that happens. And I've seen this happen. People give a price and then there's this moment of quiet and then they duck in with it and go, but I'll do it for this. Now that customer was going to go ahead anyway. It's just that they needed to put it all together.
You know, there's going to be a natural pause, isn't there, when you've given the customer that information, you know, especially if they haven't been to a framework before. They're evaluating the design you've put together, how much they like it, they're evaluating the service, and then you've just given them the price and they're going to stop and think about it. It's only natural. And it's funny you say that. You know, I talked about doing different sales jobs. In some of the training I have for one of the sales jobs, they said to us, when you give the customer the price, then you don't say a word. You give them the price and you keep your mouth shut until the customer gives you a response. That's a yes or a no, or ask the question. It doesn't matter what it is, but you don't say anything. And that's something I still, you know, remember now. So I can be here and I can give my customer a price, and I wait for a response for them, and I'm waiting for, you know, it feels like an eternity until they say, oh yeah, that's fine, or well, actually that's a bit more than I want to spend, or, you know, can you just remind me what this was again or that was again? It's natural for there to be that pause, and just, I would say to people, just be quiet. Just wait till your customer responds. Sorry, Mark, please carry on.
Absolutely. And so don't see rejection as a failure, because people reject things for their own reasons. You know, you can't be everything to everyone. Don't judge customers how much a customer will spend on their looks. You know, we talked about that right at the start of this. And don't start with budget options. You know, give your customers the best you can and let them decide whether they can afford it. And I think the last one, John, I'll leave to you.
Well, it was me that added this in. You know, it's simple, isn't it? You know, working all hours, producing lots and lots of frames at very little profit. You know, that's just, as I say, it's being a busy fool. You know, if you want to work your backside off in your business, please at least make a decent living from it.
Yes. I think you've invested so much into your business, time, money, and so on. Make a living from it. So just to cap, I said that there are places where people can go and get more information. Pricingaframe.com gives all the detail about how to go through your pricing in the very nitty gritty. And I really recommend people going through there, go back and forth with it, you know, bit by bit. People can go to our website and download our app if they like. We have a free version for everyone. And Larson-Juhl's got a lot of great resources on framing, lots of great tips. And they also have all their moldings online where you can look at them and maybe make other suggestions to customers for chop service and so on. And then there's Jon's website where you can go and see a website that's, that's trying to lure in the higher end valued customers.
Sorry, I was going to add to that, Mark, by saying, I think that there's a lot of resources that people don't necessarily realise about on Larson-Juhl's website. There's a lot of information there and a lot of good resources that are really worth looking at. On my website, there are some resources for framers as well, mostly technique orientated. But if you want to have a look at my website, please do so. I'd be very happy for you to do so.
Okay, so I think we've probably gone a bit over time, so I'm going to hand this over to Matt and let him. So I'll stop sharing now, Matt, and you can take over.
That's great. Okay. Thank you very much. That was a very informative session. So thanks a lot to both of you for all the work putting that together. Very informative, and I hope everybody got a lot from that session. We have run over a little bit, but we have got time for a couple of questions. So I'm going to throw these out to Mark and Jon. Let me just see if we can get you up on video before that.
I can't share my screen at the moment.
I think I know why, and I will see if I can get you up on the screen. Bear with me. Okay, it's not letting me do that. So I think we're going to have to, we've only got a couple of minutes. I'll throw out a couple of questions and then we'll get you to respond to them. So I did have one here from Jules who said, do you ever do quotes from email or text requests?
Can I answer that one, Mark?
Yes.
No. I mean, I say no. We all as framers get, emails, or we get, phone calls. I think as a bespoke framer, it's really, really difficult to do a quote like that because you just haven't got all the information you want. And I think that's being honest. If you can get a customer as well to come into your workshop, it shows a certain level of commitment from them. Again, I don't want the customer that's phoning around from one place to another saying, I want an A4 photograph frame with a white mount and a black frame. How much? That's not the kind of customer that I'm trying to appeal to, a price orientated customer. I want a customer that wants design and service and conservation. I would try and avoid that as possible, or you just potentially end up playing a price game.
Yeah, I used to, I'll dip in there a little bit because I kept the phone manner really cheerful and came across as an approachable kind of person, and just said, look, it's really hard to quote in that kind of way. We're happy to give obligation-free quotes. We put absolutely no obligation on you, but we'll make sure that we've got everything correct and design something for you, and you can make the decision whether to go ahead or not. Just make it easy for them to come in.
Sorry, Mark, I probably did myself a disservice there slightly and sounded a little harsh in the way that I put that across. But yeah, I mean, I will go out of my way to give that customer good service, information, spend time talking to them on the phone so they realize what kind of service is being offered. Sorry, I'm just being interrupted by knocks on the door.
That's okay. We're not too far away from finishing now.
My apologies, everybody.
That's okay. You should be able to share your video now, Jon, so that we can just say goodbye.
So I can prove that I'm here.
Yeah, you can prove that you're here. Let's see.
It's not working for me. You don't want me here.
I honestly want you to just let me try and do this.
I was just saying while you do that, I've probably done myself a misservice. I'm trying to prove in that phone conversation as well with the customer that I know what I'm talking about, that I'm going to give them a good service at the same time, and go out of my way to be helpful. That's part of what I think I want to be doing for my customers anyway.
Oh, good stuff. Try sharing your video. Let's just.
I'm going to in 1 second. Please carry on.
Make sure that everybody knows that you're not a ghost. Yeah, I have. We've probably got one here that you can answer, Mark. So Jon has asked, where in your labour costs are the costs of serving your customers, including collections?
Okay, So we talked about time worked, and time worked is different from time the business is open. So time worked is when you're making frames. And if you charge only that time, let's say you're a one-person framer and your business is open 50 weeks of the year. I don't have the numbers ahead in front of me, but let's say I should have a calculator. Let's say that's like, I can't do it, my head's gone blank, but your time worked for a one-person framer is going to be much less than the time your business is open. So therefore, if you only charge the time worked into your hourly rate, all those other things that incorporate running the business, serving customers, ordering stock, cleaning, everything else is built into that hourly rate. If you divided your overheads by the whole time you're open, you're going to have a really low hourly rate. So you take only the time you work and divide your overheads by that time.
There are days. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry,
I apologise.
people can see that on pricingaFrame.com. We do have all of that laid out, and they can go there and they can see that.
Yeah, I was going to say there are days and days where I don't get any framing done with customers coming in, with deliveries, and so on and so on. And yeah, I think it needs to be all about the amount of frames you can produce in a week.
And another point there is some framers say if the customer spends a lot of time with me, I charge them more. But if you do this correctly, it all gets evened out and you're able to offer a consistent price. You consider like a shoe shop, for instance. Someone will walk in to buy a pair of shoes. Now, some people will take an hour, some people will take 20 minutes, but the shoes cost the same regardless of how long that person took, because the hourly rate allows you to build in that lost time. And everybody pays the same price. Some people, the person who took 20 minutes is going to allow the person that took an hour to have the job at the same price.
Cool, good stuff. Good answers to those questions. And then we've got one final question, which I'll start off answering, and then you can probably add a little bit to it as well. But Barney just asked, why is the markup being reduced for the better jobs? And I think one of the important things, Barney, is, I guess, relativity in terms of pricing. And if you were to price up some of those premium jobs at the same percentage markup as you did the budget jobs, for example, 70%, then you might be getting into a price that may be ruling out, a number of people from being able to afford that. So I think there's a relativity here over the affordability for people and trying to still keep them within the realms of wanting to purchase the product from you and not scaring them off too much, whilst also still being able to make a better profit from framing those premium frames. But you can, of course, those scenarios that we went through earlier on and Mark and John run through, will provide all of those afterwards for you. You could run those scenarios at increased markups and make more profit for yourself, as long as you think your customers will take that pricing.
I had a conversation with a framer today who's just taken on our software, and he said, I went quite a bit above your markups. And I said, yeah, that's fine. He said, I was feeling really bad. And I said, no, I know his business and he runs quite a premium business. And I said, if you can get more markup, go for it. We give you a suggestion. We by no means tell people it's correct. You know your business better than anyone, and if you can make more markup on the higher end product, then do it. If you've got the type of service and advice and the store image that allows you to do that, do it. That's a great thing about setting your own markups. And when you multiply materials by a factor of 4 or 5, everybody says, oh, this is what you do. It takes no account for the business. If everybody does that and the business is substandard, it's the same price as the business that's offering a high level, and it's a level of service that dictates where your price point is. So, yeah.
Good. Absolutely. Completely agree with that. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up here because we're 5 minutes over. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Just to let you know that I will be putting the video of the webinar onto our website, and we'll put a copy of the presentation on there as well, and we'll put the different scenarios in terms of the pricing examples that we gave from the budget the mid-range and the premium on there, which will include the product codes and will include the different markups on there, so that you can see that for yourself. If you have any questions, please feel free to come through to myself, through to John, or directly through to Mark. Or if you want contact details for Mark, then again, come through to me, and I'm more than happy to provide that for you. And have a good rest of the day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you as well for the very positive comments.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.